All right, what's up, people? Yeah, I know I'm a little bit overdue for my book report on Peter Levenda's The Dark Lord. That will be forthcoming. The reason why is because, I think I need to make this video first, kind of to lay the groundwork, if you will. So what I have before you is what I would like to call my Tower of Babylon. No, this is my Tower of the Necronomicon. And what I want to do is I want to give my particular viewpoint of this entire subject. So what we need to do is we need to look at a development. So Prima of Place is the work of H.P. Lovecraft. So this is a collection, as you can see. It's Chaosium. I have a whole collection of those over there behind my G.I. Joes. He's pretty valuable, I think. But what I want to emphasize by bringing this book out is the reason I have to bring this book out is because, spoiler alert, there is no real Necronomicon. Oh, wait. I gave it all away, didn't I? Yeah. The Necronomicon was a tool of fiction created by H.P. Lovecraft. Period. End of story. Except, see, it wasn't. It was the beginning of a story. Because the work of H.P. Lovecraft was so compelling from the standpoint of creating an entirely alien, no pun intended, mythological system which had no parallel within all of history. That's what that man did. That's why I start getting pissed off with these people talking about, no, this is the real Necronomicon. I'm like, no, you're missing the fucking point. It's tell, not show. It's hint, don't tell. This is a trope within pretty much every good horror movie there is. And it's what made H.P. Lovecraft famous, along with so many other layers of his writing. So H.P. Lovecraft was writing in the early decades of, fingeritis, early decades of the 20th century. And his work was, pulp level. It wasn't selling out, bookstores, if they even had those back then. Most people went to the library. Oh shit, it's one of those old man jokes. But no, seriously, it kind of sat there. It had its cult following. But it kind of not wormed its way, but it kind of became accepted when you started getting into the 60s and 70s. It started to become accepted that this might be some kind of a blueprint towards a new understanding. So this is where you have all the creation of all these things like Wicca and all this supercilious fucking spirituality nonsense. And you had one person in particular, whose name rhymes with Peter Levenda, who had an idea. What if we can capitalize on the hype that these stories are getting because they're so compelling? But there was a problem. As I said before, the mythology represented in the weird tales of H.P. Lovecraft has no earthly parallel in history, in theology, in spirituality, in religion. It just doesn't. So that makes it kind of difficult. Well, H.P. Lovecraft, he kind of gave us some clues about what a real Necronomicon would be, kind of, right? We know it's long because he quotes page numbers in the 900s. We know it was originally called the Al-Azif, which was written by the poet, mystic, magician, Abdul Al-Hazred. So, hey, we have an idea, and it was written in the 7th century, late 7th, early 8th century. So, well, hey, what we can do is we can say, well, is there something like that, a grimoire like that, within that tradition? And the closest thing you have is this book here, called the Picatrix, which is an Arabic grimoire. although it doesn't quite go back to the 700s. Try 1400s. But the problem with the Picatrix, not only was it late, not only is there no Abdul Alhazred, but it is pretty much an orthodox Muslim grimoire. Much the same way as most of our European grimoires invoke, like if you talk about the Keys of Solomon, if you talk about all the grimoires, your Sworn Book of Honorius, your red pullet or your black pullet or both of pullets, I don't even fucking know. But they all invoke God. Even John Dee, who created his own system, also invoked God, the God of the Bible. We're talking to angels here, buddy. So you had this enterprising young man, his name rhymes with, I'm not saying it's the same, it rhymes with Peter Levenda. So you had this idea, well, what we can do is, instead of going back to an existing work, what we can do is we can create a brand new work, but give it a different context, historically. And so what Levenda settled on, which, the funny thing is, if you go to the Necronomicon, and you open it up to the very beginning of the book, you get to it. See, I told you, the tower was going to fall eventually. To get to the bookmark. I know, should have planned better. Especially with this book. So what do we have here? This is the very beginning. Our work is therefore historically authentic. The rediscovery of the Sumerian tradition. And that's quoted to Aleister Crowley. The Crowley connection I will be making much more clear when I actually get to the book The Dark Lord. And a review of that. But basically what I want to show you is that this guy, Peter Levenda, had this idea that because the Sumerian culture is the oldest one we know of, and because there are certain words that sound like certain other kind of words, it's funny how he critiques Grant for his overuse of gematria, but he does it himself. Even in the same book when he's doing it, he says, yeah, I know I have this critique of Grant, but it's okay when I do it. Or, hey, everybody does it, so why the fuck not, right? Peter Levenda's a character. We'll get to him later. Although we're looking at him right now. So what he did was he created this hodgepodge of, we know a little bit about Sumerian magic. We know about Sumerian deities, etc. Their stories, their myths, etc. We know that because of basically rock, carvings and shit like that. So we have a lot of their mythology. And so what he did was he just basically pasted together a bunch of different, apparently magical workings or whatever in the Sumerian tradition. But then he kind of snuck certain names in. Now, if you haven't seen my Necronomicon debate, you should watch it, because therein, in my first two statements, I basically give the list, which is point by point a list of all of these terms and ideas and concepts that were created by this man, this genius, were then taken by this fraud. And I can prove that Simon is Peter Levenda. He denies it still to this day. But there's literary evidence. Let me just put it this way. If you have both of these individuals, the works that are labeled as Simon would be the Necronomicon, the Gates of the Necronomicon, and Dead Names. Those are the three works that are penned under the name of Simon. So this one and two others. And in there you see that there is this contrast between two different types of astrology. On the one hand, you have the planetary astrology, which is the one we're most familiar with. You get your fortune read or whatever. They use that type of astrology. Whereas different cultures have used what's known as the sidereal astrology, which is looking at it from a different point of view of the fixed stars, so to speak, what we call the fixed stars. So this dichotomy was very much a point of this book specifically, but also of both Simon's explanation of it in his book, The Gates of the Necronomicon, in which you get a lot more prose writing from this character than you do in this book here, which is you only get a little bit at the beginning. Well, the rest of it too, but who are we shitting, right? So, and then you pick up the works of Peter Levenda, and this very same dichotomy is emphasized to the max. They quote from the same sources. Yeah. So, and the reason why, I mean, if this thing was just a little knick-knack or whatever, forgotten in history, then I wouldn't really care. The reason I care is because if this book was written exactly as is, and this word was not affixed to the front, he'd have been lucky to sell 3 fucking copies. Serious. So he basically robbed this man while he was in his grave. That's what I'm saying. That's why I have such a low regard for this individual. But we're not to the review yet. This, I have to give credit, is the only book that is actually claimed ever to be the actual Necronomicon. And as a matter of fact, in order to make his case, which I get to this in the book review, he has to pull down the true genius of this man. You know what I'm saying? They co-opt him. Simon, meaning Peter Levenda, is co-opting H.P. Lovecraft. And I find that disrespectful. Say what you want. So then we get into a different, and this is going to be the second half of this video. Hopefully it doesn't go as long. We're going to get into people that attempted to reconstruct what a Necronomicon would be. So these two I put together because they're a sequel. You have the Necronomicon over here, George Hayes' Necronomicon, and then over here, the sequel, the Aurelia text. And so you'll notice people like Robert Turner and Colin Wilson, you know, and then this one also has the introduction by Colin Wilson. So these are attempts to give little chapters. Obviously, you can see there are not very many chapters of what the Necronomicon would actually be like if we took the mythos of H.P. Lovecraft seriously, etc. And this is just like a little sampling of what that would be like with these long, about half the book is the introduction, where they're going into basically what is the psychological analysis that was, you know, pretty much the fad back then. Was everything's like they tried to analyze the goetic demons as these like states of consciousness, etc. That whole mentality was pretty prevalent back then when they were trying to figure all this shit out. And then people were like, well, you know what? We think one turd is enough. So what we're going to do is we're going to respect the guy that originally made this, created it, ex nihilo, motherfucker. And this guy who stole it as a concept and then jerry-rigged some ancient Sumerian fucking stories to fit it. Again, see my Necronomicon debate. I go through it. No holds barred. This is the Donald Tyson Necronomicon. And this is, I think, the first serious attempt to do what this guy tried. The first George Hay and then, you know, Colin Wilson, whatever, that are basically paying homage to this genius over here. Not the fake guy that I fucking buried here, but so this is very, it's very artistically well done. You know, we'll see. You know, everything is looking good. There's some, I'm skipping over them kind of just the way my fingers are rolling, but there are pictures and images in here and stuff like that. So you'll see little stuff like that. And the prose here is pretty, you know, it's like reading a novel. It's basically like, this is a novel, but it's based on the OG stuff. So you're not going to find any Sumerian in here. Now, normally that's where the story would end. And I don't believe this slipped under my radar, although it didn't slip far under. I believe we have finally found the real Necronomicon. And I couldn't believe this when I saw it. And then when I finally got it, because I thought it was going to be one of those bullshit books where it's advertised at over 900 pages and you get it and it's 900 bright pages. I've never fallen for that, but I've heard that people have done shit like that. So I'm like, well, it's only like $25 and it's 900 fucking pages. What, are you kidding me? Are you fucking joking, right? So I don't know what's the page number there. 621. Oh, it said 900. I'm suing. But basically what you get here is you get Fucking, well, 600, I guess. I fucking thought they said 900. Now I feel cheated. I want the other copy. The other, this, you know. This is an attempt to give us what a Necronomicon would be like. Not saying this is the real one, but this is the closest anybody has come to giving us a real one. And it's an homage. This is an homage to the genius. Not the not the buried faker. We're still going. We're still going. We're still going. Back to the beginning. This is a work of art. And you see, by putting his name on it, he's saying this is mine, not to be confused with the OG. This is my homage to him. So I'm not going to pretend like this is the real thing, like this one did. Where's the name Simon on the cover? I rest my case. I will be making my little book report. I think you can kind of tell where it's going to go, but there's a whole lot more that I haven't had a chance to get to, like Thelema and some other shit, primarily Thelema. But we'll get to that. The real Necronomicon. I hope I settled this debate once and for all. Of course, we know I didn't. I settled that debate 14 fucking years ago.